All right, my friends, I know that you have a lot of questions about this topic. I've been talking about sleep or lack thereof for quite some time. And look, I just had a sleep study done and I've got questions myself. So who am I going to go to but the best of the best, Ms. Mollie Eastman. She is a sleep expert. She's also founder of Sleep is a Skill, has the Sleep is a Skill podcast, and she is here to share lots of information, plus answer your questions, because I know there were a lot of questions that came our way. Mollie, we've been waiting to do this for quite some time, but I can't think of a better time to put this out there than starting the new year off right. Hey, girl.
Hey, thank you so much for having me and congrats on getting your sleep study done. I can't wait to hear more.
Me too. And look, it's a little daunting also, I have to admit. You get all these tests done and you go to do these studies and you wonder what's next. And that's going to be one question I definitely want to ask you is what is next after something like getting a sleep study done? Let's get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, acknowledging you, did you go in lab for your study?
No, I had it done at home.
At home.
They
Okay,
gave
great.
you the option.
Perfect.
But it was
yeah.
the weirdest. It was the weirdest study or pre-study I ever had because there was a bed in the background with the tech guy, and I'm like, well, this is new.
This is new. Exactly. Bring you right into the comforts of their home.
That's right.
So for the listener, if you're even, sleep study curious, to your point, you can do in lab, you can do at home, and at home are very, very easy nowadays and very convenient. Now they're not testing for some of the other sleep disorders that can be present, meaning that as of right now, there's listed over 100 different sleep-wake disorders. So if we're wanting to know more about, say, what type of sleep staging you're in, a bit more nuance around what's happening for you while you're sleeping beyond how you're breathing, which is really what's the at-home tests are really predominantly looking at. So your breath, your heart rate, some of these key metrics that are easily attained at home. And so you can now do these quite affordably. And a lot of companies will be somewhere in the realm of around $200 or so if done out of pocket or covered under insurance. So you now sleep as you usually would. You test in different ways. Some are watches, some are rings, different ways of getting this information. And then pretty quickly, you're left with a rundown of your results. And depending on your results, then there's a lot of different steps that can be taken. Do you know if what exactly came back from your sleep results, what the diagnosis was?
So right now, and I just got it back today, it's like they tell you if you're mild or you're moderate, and I'm moderate. Like there was a lot of disruption during the sleep. And this is for those out there that might have the same questions because it can be daunting. You're wondering, what does it mean to have sleep apnea? We're so used to seeing what the media puts out there that sleep apnea means you're a snorer or you're disrupting your sleep. And now you need to think about sleeping in separate rooms. And it can be really scary for somebody. So getting that back and learning that I was disrupted X amount of times in my evening, I want to know what's next. But the next step they say is to meet with your doctor, go over some options. And it's like the one thing I would think and what I would tell a client as well is that, and what you said, actually, one of your favorite quotes, you said, what gets measured gets managed, right? Like knowing what to do next. This is information, right?
Totally.
And that's really the next place to go is what do you do with this information so you can manage whatever it is that's up the unrest in your life.
Absolutely. So this is actually really great news because now that you have this information, so in your case, this moderate sleep apnea, now this means that you have this fall out of this particular range of numbers of apneas that you're having on average a night. So typically moderate is somewhere in the realm of around 15 to 29 apneas per night or per out that for that particular hour that's broken down. So that's every hour you're having these numbers wherever you fell, whatever your number was in that moderate range. Now, that's a big deal because apneas are this cessation of breathing, this period of time where you're not able to breathe. And that's quite disruptive to our sleep. Now, while obviously that's can be the bad news insight that you've been dealing with all this, the good news insight is now that you know this, now we can get to work on treating it and have a whole different experience of life, which is incredible. I mean, people describe it as kind of this new chapter in their lives. If they find, and this is the cautionary tale is sadly, there are a number of people that they take a few steps and they don't find a good fit. So say, for instance, a common path is people will start using a CPAP machine and they're not liking it. It's not working for them. And then they throw that out and now they're having untreated sleep apnea. They know they've got sleep apnea and yet they haven't found a treatment plan and they're just kind of surviving. That's what we really, really want to caution against, because this is really a fatal disease, because we know that it affects so many aspects of life, particular cardiovascularly. We know that this can be quite impactful for blood pressure, for your heart health, just to name one thing, let alone the hormonal impacts, the emotional regulation impacts. I mean, the list is endless of how much it impacts your everyday life. Virtually every domain of life is impacted with something like sleep apnea, but any poor sleep and poor performance with our sleep is going to ripple into just about every domain of life. So on the plus side, we got this information. You're sleeping with moderate sleep apnea right now. What do we do? This is where I would definitely want to encourage people to, if available to them, to ideally put together a little bit of a team. And what I mean by that is at least 2 practitioners. So meaning a good ENT that specializes in sleep can be really, really important. And then a sleep dentist. And this is often in addition to your sleep practitioner. So if you can have all of those together, that's amazing. Now, I know that's not always the easiest thing, but just kind of have that as a possible goal for yourself, because that can be addressing this at different angles, because we want to understand what is the source point for you of these apneas. For some people, it's the airway in particular. For some people, it's more nasal based. For some people, it's both. So we want to understand what's the anatomy, what's the source point for you, and what would be the best treatment plan. Now, the most common is you get back this information and people say, okay, well, let's get you a CPAP. Now, one, that's from a medical perspective, it's just sort of like often the next step. And that's how it's been for many, many years. But it is important to know if you are not responding well to CPAP, and many people have some struggle. I'm not to say that some people love it and it's game changing. But I would just also make sure that people know that there are lots of other options. There's hundreds of different oral appliances, and that would be where that sleep dentist would come into play. So those can often be really impactful. For mild apnea and snoring, and I believe are in clinical trials for moderate, is something called Excite OSA, and that's a daytime treatment. And that's so for 20 minutes a day, you're basically almost getting like a TENS unit, if you will, to the tongue, and that's strengthening the tongue muscle so that it's not falling back. And so we'll have those results. My understanding is soon for moderate, to see if that would also apply. So that could be potentially another option. But there are more. So there's also palate expansion options. Like Vivos is a popular option for that. And that would be another often sleep dentist kind of route. If the nose is more problematic, or a component of this, there are things like airway stints. So you put the airway stints, almost like a stint for your heart, but you're putting the stints up the nose, and you can sleep with that. Often people do things like even over-the-counter options. So intake breathing is one that uses magnets to expand the nose. Now, that's not something that's medical grade, but that's just an over-the-counter way to help support nasal breathing.
Yeah.
So these are
There's a lot.
options.
There's so many. And look, in this day and age of social media, every time you put in the word sleep, you get bombarded, and it can be very overwhelming, even for someone like me who works in holistic health, who's used to changing the brain and the habits. Even for me with skills of helping people get into the delta wave state and sleep, there's still the fear that we face about the uncertainty and the unknown. So it's really doing your research. I love that you mentioned a sleep dentist, which I have never heard of. And I'm a girl that had massive, major jaw surgery, which is one of the elements that I need to look at just for me. Is like thinking, how can a dentist support me in this area in addition to the ENT, So these are all really interesting ways to navigate and to go back and not make this all about me. But I know there's other people out there like myself who are going through this. It's going back to like, how did Mollie actually find out that this was an area you wanted to go into?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I'm still glad you mentioned this because to your point, this is actually so empowering, I hope, for people listening,
Mhm.
because you're serving as an example of what could be possible. Because so many people have it that, well, I'm a bad sleeper. I wake up a lot or whatever, like just almost
Mhm.
like they've lowered the bar for what's possible in themselves, maybe having no idea that they might have these undiagnosed sleep disorders that are present. And once we get this information, now you're on this path, which I know can land as a little overwhelming. It doesn't have to be so arduous too. It just sometimes can take a couple steps in finding, the thing that fits for you, kind of the same way you go shopping and no, this sweater, not quite right. This jacket, yay, found the right thing. That's what we kind of do with sleep
Right.
apnea. And now there are sleep apnea concierge services that have popped up as well. There's different options like, friend of mine has a company, Sleep Better NYC, and they've got concierge options that are all really focused on sleep apnea and really guiding you through this. There's a great podcast called Sleep Apnea Stories. So Sleep Apnea Stories has all kinds of different cases because, different people might have different things. Your jaw surgery piece
Mhm.
might be a part of this. So we want to understand what's at play because there might be different options because there is surgery is another option too.
Mhm.
There's also things like Inspire, which is almost
Inspire.
like a
Yeah.
pacemaker almost for
Yeah.
your sleep apnea. So lots of options, but there's ways to be guided. There's kind of tested and tried and true options for different people in your situation. So I'm glad you shared that. And then meaning for the listener as well, that they can find the thing that can really work for them. As far as my story, it came from my own struggles with my own sleep. And really what I think of my life now is in a 3-part series of what life looked like before I went through my sleep breakdown. Really, it was this acute period of insomnia that changed the course of my life, and the period during that, and then the period after. So that's kind of how I break up my life and how I think about it. Before I went through that period of insomnia, I had a lot of labels and narratives about my sleep. So I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead, all these ways
I'll
of
sleep
sort of,
when I'm dead
yeah,
is like, I can't
like
tell you how many
really.
times I say that.
Totally. I know
Ah.
exactly. And I was so like, yep, that's just how it is. I thought that was just it. And so it was a fixed way of being. Those are the cards that I was dealt. So just like survive it. What's the big deal? Just keep on carrying on. And what ended up happening was, as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, my habits got more and more pronounced. I would keep getting more and more righteous and justified. And I would say, well, I make my own hours, so I'll just sleep in. What's the problem? And not correlating my deleterious effects on my health with how I was managing my sleep and my life. And so I had the beginnings of an ulcer, shingles in my 20s, anxiety, cycle issues, like all kinds of things that were creeping up to show that things weren't working. Now, it was not until I went through this period of insomnia that completely changed the game for me. At its worst, I started to, when the sun would be setting, my heart would start racing and I would be panicked about another night of staring at the ceiling and feeling like I'm losing my mind. And so in that process, it was like, I can't go on like this. And the fear that I come from a family with a lot of mental health issues, and it was a question of, and sleep and mental health certainly are very interconnected. And there's a fear that, is this the moment? Like, am I now going to be dependent on different types of medications, or like, what do I do? So at its worst, I went to the doctors and left with sleeping pills. And in that moment was just really had this realization that, okay, if I'm going to change this, I've got to figure this out. And it felt like on my own, it was how it felt. So I started in on kind of this quest to understand, like, what will it take to get me sleeping again? And just from a pragmatic perspective, like, I need to figure this out. So I started going down this rabbit hole, tried a lot of things that didn't work, a lot of time, energy, effort, money. And throughout that, though, on the other side of that, I actually began to not only restore my sleep to where it was before, but then suddenly realizing that this whole new world was available to me of improving my sleep, sleeping well, optimizing my sleep, which I didn't even think that was on the table for me at all. So out of that, then my whole experience of life started to shift, and such that I could not stop talking about it. So these small groups start emerging, and now I have, kind of small, almost like AA for sleep, coming together, right? And so then I start then creating over time these programs, and then what gets created is Sleep as a Skill, online courses, now podcasts, newsletters. I have a particular niche in high stakes poker, so a large clientele, or part of my clientele, is with high stakes poker players.
Yeah, they don't know when day or night is because they're kind of just staring at the computer. Or
exactly.
Yeah,
Totally.
That's brilliant, actually.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And I share all that, not just to share all of it, but just simply to say that no matter where the listener might be at, no matter what you might be dealing with, if your sleep is like, okay, or really struggling, or anywhere in between, that we can absolutely take things to the next level. And that was the thing that I wasn't getting, was that sleep really is a skill in our modern society, and that we truly can up-level. It's just a matter of, well, where are we at? 101, 201, 3. Let's just dive in and begin to have more mastery from there.
Brilliant. And everything you're saying is just like, it tells the story of, we need to figure out that there is a problem in order to change the narrative and create a solution, right?
Yes.
And like, this is just the perfect example. My friends listening, like, just know that there are possibilities, like letting you know that there are possibilities, because we can get overwhelmed, and hearing a story that's taking you basically, like I say, from the trauma of what you were going through to the triumph of how you're handling it. And I imagine today, like, how is it for you now?
Yeah. So the fact that now I can actually quantifiably point to to sleeping in an optimal state, which I never thought was available to me, because I truly thought that it was just, there's bad sleepers and good sleepers, and that's just how it is. So now to have this measurably the case on things like Aura, Whoop, BioStrap, but also more medical grade tech, to be able to log this consistently and have that confidence and that muscle of, because sleep confidence is a component, especially when you've been kind of a sense of sleep anxiety for a stretch of time. This is an ongoing issue for a lot of people that deal with insomnia. Then there's this, once even you kind of work your way out of it, but then there's a fear of like, oh no, is it going to come back? And so a lot of that can happen for many of us that have dealt with these sleep issues. And then what's available is that we set up systems in place, learn about sleep, understand what it takes to manage it well. And then we can truly build that muscle to have the trust and the belief and the faith that even if, you travel and it gets a little wonky for a stretch of time, that that you have what it takes to bring things back online, and you can point to your track record of that. So for me, I have years and years and years of sleep data that I can log and see the improvements and the benefits of all of these things that we can learn about for our sleep to make a difference with the results.
By the way, if your energy alone says that something's right, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm like, you just have so much energy that I'm like, this girl is getting good sleep. She either
I love that. Well, that makes me happy, because we were chatting before we hit record, and I've been traveling and all the things. So I'm happy to hear that is how it's landing. So yay, go sleep.
And that's a big thing too, with traveling, being out there in the world, constantly not even sleeping in your own bed. If you're not sleeping well in your own bed, you have to force yourself to sleep well in another bed. I sometimes sleep better when I'm out and about, when I'm actually in a hotel room, because I'm like, oh, wow, these pillows are so good. How do I stuff this into my bag and take it home? Right. Because sometimes it could be a pillow adjustment that could be a difference too, or the mattress. But what I want to do, I know we are limited on time. I do want to let folks know that Mollie is graciously offering her optimized bedroom. It might not be what you think it is. She's giving away a download PDF to 18 strategic high and low tech ways to optimize your bedroom. Download it. I'm going to put it in the podcast notes. You're going to have it available to you. See where you fall. But I also want to use this time to answer some of these questions, if you don't mind.
Perfect.
We have a ton of questions from people all over the country, actually all over the world, that have questions for you, Miss Mollie. So can we just get it started real quick?
Let's do it. Yay.
Okay. So the first one, actually, coincidentally, comes from Mary in Dallas. And she says, when traveling, are there tips and tricks to get a good night's rest, or on that first night especially? And usually she doesn't get a good night rest until she gets home, or it's the last night she's away, which doesn't really help. So what can we tell Mary?
Oh, totally. Great question. Okay. So if you're jumping multiple time zones, I highly suggest the app called Time Shifter. And what's so great about that one is they're using the same algorithm that NASA uses to keep their astronauts on time when they're shuttling through space. The sun is rising and setting every 90 minutes for those astronauts. So they take it very seriously, keeping them on time, if you will. And so they use that same algorithm to be applied to your particular route. So you put in your flight kind of confirmation number, and what will come out is a whole itinerary by which you can set up changing and time shifting like a verb days in advance of that trip. And then you can also be shifting during and then after. And then on the flight back, you'll be doing the same thing, is that you're beginning to shift even days before you're leaving. So if it's, like a couple week long thing, you have a few of those buffer days to start adjusting that. It can make a huge difference. I ended up traveling for about 3 years as a digital nomad, back and forth from Southeast Asia to New York with my husband. And out of it, that app was like game changing and would really obliterate a lot of the traditional symptoms of jet lag. So I highly suggest that one.
Time Shifter. Yeah.
Time Shifter.
All right. We'll put that in the notes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Love that question. Thank you, Mary. The next question is from Stacy, and she says she sleeps better. Stacy sleeps better when not at home, but also her spouse is snoring. The dog is moving. The kids are doing this. It's everything else around her that's actually causing her disruption. And this is actually interesting because I've just heard a term for the first time that kind of plays into this called sleep divorce. And it sounds so icky.
Yes.
I wish they could call it something else, but this kind of sounds like it taps into that. Like people are getting better sleep, having better relationships by sleeping separately. But what can Stacy do to sleep better if she's doing it away from home?
Perfect. And exactly what you said too. So there is another term called sleep alliance that is kind of like a nicer branding. And it's actually our most popular out of almost 150 episodes. Our number one is about a sleep alliance / sleep divorce. And that's with Dr. Wendy Truxell. And I mention her because she has an entire book on this topic called Sharing the Covers. And so it's all about whoever you might be sharing the covers with, the dog, the cats, the kids, the partner, whatever, that you have a thoughtful plan in place and communication and dialogue going to ongoingly support this. So if anything changes, there's a different schedule or whatever, that you can take some of those actions. So those would be resources that I would check out, because there's entire kind of strategies. And even if it's a short-term thing, if it's a short-term kind of sleep alliance while we treat the sleep apnea and find the right, kind of solution there, or, if we're dealing with snoring and we're trying to find the way to approach that, or there's a different schedule for a short period of time, there might be a short-term sleep alliance that's created until we can kind of join forces again, if that makes sense. And then also it does make the argument for some relationships that might be better served by continuing ongoingly. There's many couples that decades and decades, and they swear by sleeping in separate beds. So kind of some of those unconventional approaches.
I absolutely love that you changed the narrative on that. Like sleep divorce does not sound like anything any couple would want to do if they're trying to have a better relationship. So alliance is a much better word. I love that. And we will also put the episode that you're talking about the sleep alliance with Dr. Wendy in the podcast notes, because let's podcaster to podcaster, we're always trying to help each other out. So, and it'll help others out in the long run. So
totally. Yeah.
Awesome.
There's a
Great
reason
share.
it was number one, because people are struggling with that. So you hit the nail on the head.
All right. So Evan has a question. Evan's also from Texas. He says, what do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't calm the mind and stop thinking about things? In addition to havening, which I've told Evan about, what else can we do?
Yeah, so good. So I have an entire kind of set of PDFs and protocols in our cohorts of different things that people can do, because different people might, kind of relate to different things that they might enjoy in the evenings. But a lot of this is coming from two different approaches. One being, of course, CBTI is supposed to be the first line treatment or approach if you are dealing with sleep disorders or sleep troubles, right? So when I went to the doctor and I left with sleeping pills, that's not supposed to be how it goes. Now it is supposed to be, the recommendation first is supposed to be CBTI. And there's a reason for that. It's a really a high efficacy as far as its effectiveness. So there's a lot of strategies within there. One really popular one is called stimulus control. And stimulus control is the method by which you're keeping your bed as sleep and sex. And, kind of you've probably heard of that. And so then the thinking is if you're awake for, say, 15, 20 minutes and you're not really seeing any sight anytime soon where you're going to fall back asleep, the thinking from that approach is you get up, you go out into another room if available to you, or at least outside of your bed, to kind of get a different vantage point, do something relaxing and calming and dim lighting until you're sleepy again. And then you go back into the bedroom so that you're not linking up your bed with stress and what have you. And then you repeat that process until you fall asleep. Like if you don't fall asleep, you keep doing it. So that's with CBTI. And of course, what are you doing during those times? So relaxing things. So reading, meditation, there's different breath work, gratitude, kind of doing a brain dump of any stressors, journaling. There's a whole kind of series of things that you might be able to draw upon that you could do to fill that time. Now, another approach is called ACT or ACTI, Acceptance Commitment Therapy for Insomnia. That one's a bit more of a gentle approach. For me, that was actually one of the things that was really helpful in my journey of restoring my sleep was instead of getting up during those times, you actually just still lay in your own bed. And you actually just accept the fact that you're awake, believe it or not. And instead of trying to fight the fact that you're awake, you just kind of lean into it, notice any of the thoughts that are popping up of oh, how am I going to make it through tomorrow? Oh my gosh, I've got so much on my calendar, whatever you go into. You just, there's a stress thought. There's an anxiety thought. And you just kind of notice them. And then you also have the thinking that while I'm in this relaxed state, this is still beneficial to my body. I'm still getting rejuvenation or benefits. And that can be really calming to the anxious mind because you can know that even, maybe it's not the same as sleep exactly. And certainly sleep is a whole other paradigm, but it's kind of giving you a bit of this sense that I'm still resting my body. I have the lowered heart rate because I'm in the supine position. And this is giving me benefit while I'm in this state. So this can kind of take some of the pressure off. Because one of the things we can find for people with sleep issues is now we're trying to force sleep and we're saying, I got to get back to sleep. I got to get back to sleep. So if we can lessen that.
Your brain starts working when you're thinking too much about it. I mean, yeah, you're totally out of the subconscious mind. So that's a good one. Let's, we have time for two more. Let's, Amy from Pennsylvania. She uses a CPAP and she says she does not feel more rested. She's not well rested and she never feels well rested when she wakes up. What can I do?
Oh, yeah. Well, and so often we have multiple things at play. So for many people in our cohorts, we have people that have sleep apnea and they're also looking to further improve their sleep quality because, of course, the diagnosis for sleep apnea is one step in the journey of optimizing our sleep. So we'd want to know a lot more about what's going on for her. Now, one, if it's that the sleep apnea is not being properly treated. So if the CPAP is not fully working for her as well as it could, that's where we could go down some of the paths that we spoke about for you, whereas sleep dentist, a good ENT, checking in with our sleep doctor that everything's working with the CPAP and the kind of the readouts for this. You can even be tested again for your sleep apnea and make sure just that everything's kind of working as we would imagine. So we'd make sure that with whatever CPAP you're using, is that the right fit for you? There's all kinds of things that we can do to optimize for that. Now, but aside from that, that's where we go into all of these things that we can optimize for any of us for sleep, apnea or not. And so what we do in our programs is particularly under the realm of circadian rhythm entrainment. And so we're aiming to entrain and strengthen our circadian rhythm. So that would be one of the other features that we would look to for an individual like that.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually plays into this next question, which I think we've kind of answered. And that is from Womenpreneur from the UK. How can I build a consistent and healthy sleep routine in today's busy world? And I would think you know that firsthand. I know that firsthand. So maybe it's just a simple answer on that one, if there is a simple answer.
I know, exactly. So one of the most important things for sleep is that light is crucial, and that sleep loves consistency. So what our goal is one, to create at the beginning, at the bare minimum, a consistent sleep wake time. And that becomes your anchor point of your consistency on this mission to improve our sleep. So say you pick 7 a.m. as your consistent wake up time 7 days a week. And you can swing that out plus or minus, say, like 30 minutes, but that's even in and of itself pretty rare. Most people they're swinging out on the weekends or lots of long naps or whatever. So even beginning there, that would be a big deal. So start with that. But then we would want to make sure that you have very clear day mode and night mode. So and this could sound so basic, but it's so difficult for most of us to practice an application, which is we want brighter days and darker nights. And the reason for that is that light and dark have a real drug-like effect if used properly. And the brighter days we're talking about is that on average, the average person today is exposed to light that's on 100 times too dim by day on average, and 100 times too dark or too bright in the evening. So meaning that we're kind of flipped upside down of what we should be getting. Now, the problem for this is that the average indoor environment is about less than 1,000 lux. And that's a big problem because on a summer day, it can get up to 100,000 lux. And that's a huge discrepancy of the difference of the type of unequivocal, kind of punch you in the face that this is day and this is night. Instead, we're now in this like limbo world where we're in very dim lighting by day and then upside down and turning on all of our lights at night, that are causing huge circadian mismatches, to the point that just recently, almost 250 circadian scientists, referencing almost 3,000 peer-reviewed publications, about 2,700 to be specific, they are finding that it warrants calling for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night. Why? Because they're massively impacting our sleep-wake, but even beyond that, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, reproductive disorders, psychiatric disorders. So all of these things are just so linked up with our environment. And so as simple as replacing our light bulbs with red or orange bulbs or candlelit, options, all of those can be a simple and affordable way to set up that evening routine for that individual. Because when the environment starts to inform what we're doing, the presence of that darkness can help facilitate the creation and the production of melatonin. The creation of that melatonin can lower our heart rate, downregulate, lower our body temperature, and help kind of guide us so that we're not having to struggle. You'll just start feeling really tired, and you won't need to have 9 million apps to meditate yourself off to sleep. It will just sort of happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Wow. I have to tell you, even though you are not a doctor, even though you are not someone that has studied this for 20, 30 years, you come from such a place of knowledge about this. And I know this is from finding answers for yourself too. I mean, and then when we do that, we want to help others. I mean, that's really how it works. Mollie, thank you so much. I want to end this conversation because I know you got a hot minute. Right. And you're jumping to something else. I want to do a quick little game with you that I do with my guests.
Great.
To keep you up.
Perfect.
And a little word association, words that I found from this podcast episode. I'm going to throw them out there at you. Come back with the first word that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Let's do this. Optimize.
Sleep.
Apnea.
Tired.
Anxiety.
Stressed.
Restorative.
Awake.
Insomnia.
Anxiety.
Sleep.
A gift.
I'm just throwing this word out there because this is like the best SAT word, deleterious.
Oh, yes.
You said that before, and I was like, I've never heard anyone say that on this podcast, let alone in a sentence in recent years.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh.
That's a good word, by the way.
Oh, good. Well, the visual I think of with that's my word association is spidering. So like spidering into every aspect of our life.
Yeah, causing harm that we just don't need.
Yeah.
And rested.
At ease.
Love it. Love
Love
being at
it.
ease. Thank you so much for
Yes.
sharing so many powerful ways to be at ease. This has been such a joy. And listen, reminder to those of you listening, optimize that bedroom, download that PDF. I'm going to put it in the podcast notes, as well as the episode that Mollie was talking about with Dr. Wendy about Sleep Alliance, those 18 strategic high-low tech ways to optimize your bedroom, and so much more. Mollie, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I've found it to be helpful. It's actually eased my mind. And I know that now, like you said, what we manage gets measured. And then that is how we can make a change and a difference for our own well-being.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for having me and for taking the time. It was amazing. I love the word associations. I've never done that on a podcast, so that was amazing.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yes, love it.
Great. Thanks so much, Mollie. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, my sunshines, do not snooze on this. Grab Mollie's optimized bedroom download, 18 high and low tech ways to optimize that bedroom of yours. And make sure that you also check out all the links in the listen notes. I'm going to share that podcast that Mollie talked about, that she is talking about Sleep Alliance, her #1 episode of Sleep is a Skill podcast, as well as some helpful apps while you're traveling, while you're on the go, and how to really just optimize your sleep and get better rest and restore once and for all. And if you want to learn more about how havening can help you get into that sleep state, that delta wave state, that yummy state that just helps you be kind to your mind, I've got you. All you have to do is find out that information that is listed in the podcast notes for you as well. HIListically Speaking is edited by Two Market Media, with music by Litbone Redding, and of course, listened to by you. So thank you for another great year at the mic. Get some rest, be kind to your mind, and remember, I will see you next week. I believe in you, I love you, and be well.
I know